From the Outreach Building on the University Park campus of Penn State, this is a debate between the candidates for Pennsylvania's 5th Congressional District. Here is tonight's moderator, Patty Satalia.
Good evening and welcome to Race for the Fifth, WPSU's live debate between Republican incumbent Glenn Thompson and his Democratic challenger, Kerith Strano Taylor. This is a rematch. The two first faced off in 2014. They're competing for a seat in the House of Representatives on behalf of Pennsylvania's 5th Congressional District. Tonight's debate is being simulcast on WPSU TV and WPSU FM, and it's being streamed on WPSU.org/vote16. The questions for tonight's debate were selected and prioritized in part based on polls that rank the top issues of the 2016 campaign. They come from a range of sources, including viewers and listeners from across the 5th District, WPSU's debate staff, and from the candidates themselves. Both candidates submitted one question for their opponent. In the interest of fairness, each candidate will be asked to answer his or her own question, which I will modify for the questioner if appropriate. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the candidates. Republican Glenn Thompson is serving a 5th term in Congress. He's a member of the House Agriculture Committee and serves on the House Natural Resources and Education and Workforce Committees. His Democratic challenger is Kerith Strano Taylor, an attorney with the Taylor Law Firm and a member of the Brookville Area School Board. Welcome. Here are the rules for tonight's debate. Both of you will have an opportunity to answer every question. Candidates will have 90 seconds per question, and a clock will buzz when your time is up. We encourage rebuttal when there's disagreement and once both of you have given your answer. If candidates would like to rebut something, indicate that with a discreet hand signal. In the interest of getting to as many questions as possible, rebuttal will be at the moderator's discretion. At the end of the debate, you will each have 1 minute for a closing statement. As decided by a coin toss earlier tonight, Ms. Strano Taylor will answer the first question. During the primary, you were all in for Senator Bernie Sanders. In fact, you were a Bernie Sanders delegate at the Democratic National Convention in July. Leaked emails suggest that the DNC conspired against the Sanders campaign. Will Hillary Clinton get your vote on November 8th? Why or why not?
Firstly, Patty, WPSU, thank you for hosting this night. I think it's so important that people are able to kick our tires and really hear what we have to say. I was very proud to serve as a delegate for Senator Sanders at the convention in Philadelphia. And I was disappointed that we weren't the victor there, that we didn't end up with Senator Sanders on the top of the ticket. However, I started paying attention to what Mrs. Clinton had to say, and she had to sell me. Right? I needed to hear that there was something that I could stand behind in her candidacy. And over the course of the summer and up until now, she has done that. She has a history of collaborating with people and getting things done. And that's what it takes to get things done in Washington. And I not only admire it, but I have learned things from her, watching her in this campaign. But most notably is her ability to deal with the vitriol and the denigrating language that's coming at her with grace. This presidential campaign is embarrassing. It's despicable, to be brutally honest. We should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. It's something that I most admire about Congressman Thompson. This is the second time around, and we've always been able to disagree without being disagreeable. So I'm proud to cast my vote for Hillary Clinton, but even more so, I'm proud to cast my vote against Donald Trump, because he's not the kind of language we need in the White House. If my son repeated the things he said, I'd have to wash his mouth out with soap.
Representative Thompson, in the wake of a video revealing Donald Trump making predatory comments about women, more than 50 leading Republicans have either said they will not vote for their party's presidential nominee or have explicitly called for him to step down. Will you vote for Donald Trump on November 8th? Why or why not?
I will be voting for Donald Trump. Let me explain why. I trust the voters. That's really why I've been effective at working in a very bipartisan way. Once the election's over, whoever's elected in all the positions. My record's clear on that. After Mr. Trump won all 67 counties, he was the only presidential candidate to do that in Pennsylvania, I put a Trump Pence sign in my front yard, and it was stolen. And when I was asked to put one back in by my Sunday school teacher, who happens also to be my high school sweetheart and my wife of 36 years. She's a mother of a pastor, soldier, and a music teacher. And she's told me this. She said, and we both are not happy with the words of Donald Trump. We found those rude and unacceptable. He said, but her explanation to me was, that God takes the imperfect and makes perfect for his purpose. And when we look at this race, I want a commander-in-chief that when our son, who's still active duty, if he in the future is deployed and his unit is under fire and they need reinforcements, they need someone to come in and save them, I want to have confidence in that person. I want a commander-in-chief that's going to protect our national secrets and not do reckless and careless things with whether it's email or any other types of information. And for me, that only candidate for that is Mr. Trump.
All right. This question begins with you, Representative Thompson. Despite some good news on the economic front nationally, namely an increase in household incomes and a steady uptick in the job creation index, polls consistently show that the economy is voters' #1 concern. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the national unemployment rate is 4.9%. Pennsylvania's unemployment stands at 5.7%. And things are less rosy in the 5th District, where the unemployment rate is 8.1%. What have you done in your last term, and will you do if reelected, to help grow the economy and address voters' concerns about job security and their financial futures?
Well, Patty, thanks for the question. Also, thanks to you and WPSU and this great land-grant university for putting this program together. Actually, I'm a leader in the areas of strength for Pennsylvania when it comes to jobs. As an agriculture leader, one of the subcommittee chairmen, my 3rd term as subcommittee chairman, I helped to write the Farm Bill. And agriculture is our #1 industry. We have a great land-grant university that is authorized through the Farm Bill. And I'm proud to help author that and support it. 1 in 7 Pennsylvanians owe their jobs directly or indirectly to agriculture, and specifically a lot of people in the Pennsylvania 5th District. So I work to make that industry robust and we grow based on their strength. Energy has been an emerging opportunity, largely thanks to the intellectual capabilities that are found right here on Penn State University when it comes to the natural gas industry. And we've seen a real growth in that industry. We've seen new jobs. We've seen an opportunity for our kids to get an education and find a job here at home, because it's just not natural gas and energy related jobs. A rising tide floats all boats. So if you make a robust economy, other wages go up and other opportunities for our kids to be here. One of the key things in terms of jobs is having job training. And I am the national leader on career and technical education training. I authored the bill that passed unanimously out of the Education Workforce Committee in July. It passed 405 to 5 out of the House of Representatives in September, and I'm very hopeful this will find its way to the President's desk by the end of 2016.
Ms. Strano-Taylor, if elected, how will you address the persistent economic anxiety that too many Pennsylvanians in the 5th District and in the country feel?
The first thing I would do is put my name on the Reclaim Act as a co-sponsor, which Mr. Thompson has neglected to do, as well as all of the other Republican congressmen in Pennsylvania. The Reclaim Act is an act that would put about $6 million a year into Pennsylvania, putting out-of-work coal miners back to work, reclaiming coal mines and streams that have been destroyed by coal mining. There's about $2 billion sitting in this fund. This bill was sponsored by a Republican from Kentucky and some of our Democratic colleagues east in Pennsylvania, and not a single Republican from Pennsylvania will put their name on it. So job training is great if you have jobs for people to do. And as a coal miner, if your mine closes when you're 49, 50 years old, what are you going to retrain to do in the 5th Congressional District? Our unemployment rate at 8.1 is higher than it should be. We also have a terrible underemployment rate, and yet there's a bill waiting to put our Pennsylvanians back to work, and not a single Republican from Pennsylvania will put their name on it. So we have work to do, and our ag economy, good. But yet, Mr. Thompson voted to repeal the country of origin labeling for chicken, beef, and pork. How does that help Pennsylvania farmers to now compete against folks in China that want to process our food and ship it back frozen? So there's so much that we need to do, but we need to be getting our Pennsylvania people back to work, and there's ways to do that Mr. Thompson is passing on.
You have not signed the Reclaim Act. Can you tell us why?
Sure. Well, let me start with the country of origin labeling, because that's important. And if you check with the folks at the Department of the Agriculture Department here, they'll tell you that the fact is we were sued, and it was certain pieces of meat within beef. And we were sued, and we were found 3 times this country lost its suit. And we were facing tariffs, penalties, and all kinds of penalties that would be put on other types of. And so this was done because it had to be done. That was mandatory labeling. You can still, in a voluntary way, list the country of origin. A lot of people like to know where their food's from, and I certainly support buy local, buy fresh. In terms of the Reclaim Act, the way that legislation is trying to drain money out of cleaning up the environment. And that's been something I'm a leader on. I chair the subcommittee on watersheds, and the Abandoned Mine Fund is incredibly important. It was contributed by the hard work of coal miners. You know, my opponent is from Jefferson County, where there's still tremendous scars and watersheds that have been impacted. Her neighboring county, Clearfield County, has more abandoned mine sites than the state of New Mexico. And so this is trying to do job training when we have job training funds elsewhere.
But we do have 5,300 miles of polluted streams that
we
this
do. And you know
Reclaim
what?
Act
If
would
you
address.
if you do the Reclaim Act, it will suck money away from cleaning up the environment, and it will be duplicative, because we already have the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which transformed job training for folks who have lost their jobs. And so let's keep this money for cleaning up the environment, cleaning up the watersheds.
And we'll give you 30 seconds to rebut.
This would actually pay to put our out-of-work coal miners back to work cleaning up our streams. This isn't just about job training. It's putting these 2 pieces together, so we are employing people that are no longer employed to actually do the work of cleanup. And on the issue of country of origin labeling, you said, we were sued, we had to. Funny thing about being an attorney, I read the decision. It was the language in our law that was a problem. There's lots of lawyers in Washington that could have rewritten it, but instead they said, we were sued, we have no choice, we need to repeal this. And you're right. We have companies that can willingly put made in China on their packaging. I don't see them voluntarily doing that. So it made the playing field not level. And I think to the disadvantage of our American farmers.
This question goes first to you, Ms. Strano-Taylor. There's a lot of talk in this election about economic fairness and jobs lost to trade deals. According to a recent Marketplace Edison research poll, a majority of Americans, 55%, think the decline in manufacturing jobs is more due to trade deals than any other factors. Donald Trump is a vocal critic of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, the 12-nation free trade agreement negotiated by the Obama administration, and Hillary Clinton has been both for it and against it. Do you support the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Why or why not?
I do not. At all. I think it's a terrible, terrible direction for us to go as America. And interestingly enough, Mr. Thompson was against it, but then voted to give it fast-track authority. So, right, his presidential candidate says it's terrible, yet he voted to give fast-track authority to the Obama administration. One of the handful of times I think he agreed with anything that came out of the Obama administration. The TPP, in order to level the playing field, instead of raising us all up, it's knocking us down at our knees. And that is not a position that we should be moving into the global marketplace. We have to make ourselves stronger. And we were on that path. We've done this before in history, right? If you look at the 50s and the 60s, we had strong manufacturing here. People were earning wages that could support a family with one person staying home. The TPP is not the direction we should go, as we've learned from disastrous trade deals like NAFTA, right? It seemed like a good idea at the time, but in hindsight, we see that it is not. It's going to be interesting to see what we get out of either, no matter who wins the presidency. Because as you noted, Mrs. Clinton at one point thought it was good, and now she doesn't. One of the things I most admired about Senator Sanders is he was pretty consistent about that. It was never good, and he wouldn't have supported it. So I'm hoping that we can build a coalition large enough to stop it, because it's not good for American workers and it's not good for America.
Representative Thompson, do you support or not support the TPP?
Well,
And why? Or why not?
Well, let me talk about trade a little bit, and then specifically the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I have worked on specifically as a member of the Agriculture Committee. Trade is extremely important, and we normally win when it comes to trade. Unfortunately, past trade agreements have not been well done. NAFTA was not well done. It was free trade, but it wasn't fair trade. There was no holding our trading partners' feet to the fire in terms of compliance with the rules that were negotiated, and I don't think there were good rules negotiated. Agriculture in particular during the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, that industry in Pennsylvania remained very resilient. It was healthy, and it was healthy because it had good trade opportunities. And we, in terms of we need to look at, and I also want to point out that there's no such thing as fast track. If you're informed and you're really reading legislation, looking at what it is, and if you listen just to the mainstream establishment media, you would hear it. But the Trade Promotion Authority was about setting the rules for trade and making sure that countries didn't manipulate their currency, making sure that they protected intellectual property, making sure that they didn't dump steel into our nation, making sure that environmental concerns were on equal foot in terms of manufacturing, on human resources and labor laws were on equal foot. And so Trade Promotion Authority, I did vote for that because that was setting the rules. And I do have the opportunity to vote yes or no on the final TPP. Let's see where it winds up.
Wages were mentioned just a moment ago, and this beginning with you, Representative Thompson. Currently, the national minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, where it's been since the last increase in 2009. The Democratic Party has adopted a call to raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour as part of its party platform, and Donald Trump says he would, quote, like to see an increase of some magnitude, but believes that states, not the federal government, should make the decision. Do you support raising the minimum wage, and if so, to what?
Now, I do not support raising the minimum wage on a federal perspective because every state is different, the economies are different, the characteristics, the citizen needs, the economics. I'm not looking to put more people into poverty. I want to lift people out of poverty. And here's the question I have for everyone here and at home. If you're the sole bread earner, the wage earner for your family, why do we want you to make minimum wage? I don't care wherever you put minimum wage, it's always the minimum wage. We need to do better than that for our citizens. And so that's why I'm a national leader on providing access to job training, because I want people to have access to training. The Strengthening Career and Technical Education Bill for the 21st century, that passed 37-0 out of Education and Workforce, 45-5 out of the House, off the House floor. It restores rungs on the ladder of opportunity. It increases greater access to job training, not just for our kids that are in career and technical education training in secondary schools today, but it's for the family that woke up this morning, find themselves in underemployment or unemployment. We have significant underemployment here in Center County, one of the leading counties out of 67 on underemployment. And we also have families that have been waking up to poverty, and sometimes intergenerational poverty, for decades. We need to provide an exit strategy, and it can't be minimum wage. It's got to be greater than minimum wage.
Same question to you, Ms. Strano Taylor.
I'm absolutely in favor of raising the minimum wage. Firstly, it's a complete falsehood to say that there is anybody out there that is striving to make minimum wage. There is not a single person earning $7.25 an hour going, yeah, I'm doing great today, right? These are the jobs that are available, and it is the minimum wage, right? This is what you get when it's the job that's available. I'm thankful that companies like Sheetz have voluntarily raised their wage to $10.10. Amazing. Walmart finally came along, raised their starting wage, which is good. But full-time minimum wage is $1,256 a month. Just think about what you pay in rent, car insurance, food, right? A cell phone, which you need to be able to call back to possibly get a better job. That's not enough money to live on, and it certainly doesn't put money in our economy. Every state that has raised their minimum wage has seen an uptick in employment and their economy. It's a driver, right? So when you get money in people's pockets, they spend it. They go out to eat with their families. They buy a little larger TV at Walmart. Raising the minimum wage is crucial to pulling our families out of poverty. To the job training issue, it's only helpful to be trained for a job if there are jobs to be had. There aren't. We have an 8.1% unemployment rate. You can't tell me it's because none of our people are trained for those jobs, right? That's not what's happening here. So we raise the wage and we get our families moving forward and spending more money in the economy. That's how we move our district forward.
30 seconds, Representative Thompson, to rebut.
Well, there certainly are jobs available in all of our communities that employers cannot find qualified and trained individuals. If you don't believe that, you look over the letters from over individually and through coalitions, over 250 organizations that supported my legislation for the Career and Technical Education bill, because they know that they have that need. And there's also other ways that we can do this. I'm proud to support a local program. It's called the Entrepreneurial Women's Expo, and I sponsor scholarships for ladies of all ages to be able to attend that program and to learn entrepreneurship, to learn how to create opportunities and take control over their lives in terms of the economics. And those are the types of things that happen a lot that we don't talk about that really helps to lift people up to greater opportunity, greater wages, more family-sustaining opportunities.
Do you want your 30 seconds on this?
I do. I'm curious if you offer childcare for the Women's Expo, right? I mean, most of the job training programs that have been offered happen in the evenings. And daycare, traditional daycare that you can use subsidies for, are only available during the day.
This is a daytime program.
Say again?
It's a daytime program.
It's a day, well, and they're probably working another job. So, right, I mean, we have to get to the brass tacks of what people are suffering under. And while it's an admirable program, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem that many people, including many women, trying to raise their kids in this district.
We now go to the candidate questions for each other, and we begin with you. Your question, please, Ms. Strano Taylor, for Congressman Thompson.
Okay. A wife of a two-time Iraqi war vet wrote to you and asked you for help getting her husband his VA care locally. And you wrote back to him this letter, and it says, "Thank you for contacting my office concerning your issue with the Veterans Choice Program. First, I would like to thank your husband for his service to your country. I'm sorry you've incurred problems with the Veterans Choice. Unfortunately, so have many others in our district, as we are fortunate to have several CBOCs in our area, but it does interfere with the choice program. I'm aware that this is a problem for many of our veterans, and it needs to be addressed as they deserve the best and closest treatment. Again, thank you for bringing this important matter to my attention. With kindest regards." I helped this family get their care locally. Why didn't you?
Well, you know what? I work hard every day, and I think pretty effectively at serving our veterans. And I'm frustrated when I have a family, and I can't really talk about the details of this family because of confidentiality forms, but I know it's an individual that moved from the West or Midwest in 2015, around October 2015, and had some service-related issues and problems. And trust me, we did. We did our best with it. But I have to work within the Veterans Administration system, which is controlled by a Democratic administration. They throw up roadblocks sometimes, and sometimes you do your best on constituent services. You know, my promise is always partnership and to do my best. And most of the time, we're able to deliver the types of outcomes and results and services that our veterans and their family members need. That's personal for me. I've got my son's a Purple Heart wounded warrior. He's still serving actively today. My daughter-in-law was injured in training, and she's retired now. And they both have health issues. And so I dedicate myself. I actually, in the audience today is a good friend of mine and his wife, Marine Lance Corporal Tim Dobus, and his wife Robin. They got their 2 little boys with them. And that's a great example of the types of things I do. We helped Tim with his GI Bill for education. And unfortunately, after he developed signs and symptoms of ALS, we worked hard to get his disability service-related, so they could get the services he needs across the board, all the types of things that our veterans depend on. And something that I think we all have an obligation to do.
And now back to you. The 5th Congressional District, as you know, is the largest district in the state geographically, with more than 600,000 constituents spread out from State College to Erie. And presumably there are a lot of constituent requests for assistance. If elected, how would you handle constituent services?
Much like I did this case. I mean, I learned of this because the young woman who gave permission for us to share it tonight posted it on Facebook. I came across it on Facebook, and I looked up an old school phone book, found her father-in-law. She came into my office, and I said, we could do better than this. It took me 6 months, and I'm not a congressman, right? But we did it, and we got this boy local care in his local hospital. So It's about solving problems, and it's what I do for a living. And I personally believe it's the primary obligation of a congressperson, is to do constituent service first and consider and propose legislation second. And as we've seen in this case, not here, and it makes me wonder how many more is my first year going to be spent taking care of all the people that didn't get taken care of in the last 8 years.
All right, we go to our question from you, Glenn Thompson.
Okay. Ms. Strano-Taylor, during your past 2 campaigns, you have suggested that problems with our system stem from lobbyists and lobbyist money in politics and special interests. However, there's only one person running for the 5th District who has been employed and registered with the United States Senate as a lobbyist. And do you regret having worked, given your perspectives, do you regret having worked as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I find it really funny that my name even shows up on that list, but I'm happy to explain how it is.
It's there.
So I graduated from Penn State at 20 with a degree in political science. I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was an administrative assistant at Sprint, the government affairs office of Sprint, and I sorted mail and FEC complaints. After a year of that, I moved on and became the assistant director of government affairs for a group called NPES. It was a printing trade association. And my boss went onto the Hill to talk about issues. And I was his briefcase carrier, right? And in order for me to go onto the Hill, they registered my name. So this is in 1998, I think. And for a period of 9 months, I carried my boss's briefcase and umbrella onto Capitol Hill when he would go have meetings. So the idea that my name shows up as being a lobbyist, I read research and I, helped my boss do his job. I realized that that was not my calling and got my rear end to law school. And it was right after that that I started at George Mason University School of Law. So lobbyists are the problem. What I was doing was carrying someone's briefcase, and he wasn't donating gobs of money, right? It wasn't the NRA, it wasn't the U.S. Chamber. It was a small printing trade association. So I'm not ashamed of the work that I've done, but I certainly wasn't a lobbyist in the sense of what we have now.
And back to you for an answer to your question. More money than ever flows into political campaigns, a trend that concerns most Americans regardless of party. So what, if any, campaign finance reforms will you support?
We have already had significant campaign finance reform in terms of at the federal level. And I'm not sure most people are familiar with that, and I don't know if most people can really distinguish between what happens in Washington and what happens in Harrisburg, for example, where, quite frankly, there are no limits for contributions. I saw a few election cycles back, we had the trial lawyers had donated $1 million to a judge candidate, superior judge candidate. Does that buy influence? Boy, I would think so. On the national level, actually, there's strict limits. It's for a cycle, it's $2,700. For a PAC, which it's a political action committee. That's it's like the organization that Kerith had lobbied for is, they had a set limit. Today, it's about $5,000 per election cycle, and so. Here's my concern with monies today. I am very concerned about the super PACs. I'll be honest with you. I think they crowd out and they distort and they water down the impact of the individual voter, the individual citizen. I'm not on the Supreme Court. I don't agree with their ruling that somehow that was okay. I would take exception that anything that dilutes the impact of an individual vote, individual citizen is not good and not constitutional.
Any follow-up?
Quickly, when it comes to campaign finance reform, I think that any time spent raising money on the American taxpayer's dime is theft. Personal opinion. Your job is to go to Washington, serve constituents, and consider and propose legislation. So we now know from many reports that between 50 and 70% of their time, they're expected to raise money, and I think it's wrong. So when I get there, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spend all of my time helping the folks that need help and considering and proposing legislation. But I also dream of the day when I get there and lobbyists want to come talk to me about legislation. It's their job to get on the phone and find the person who disagrees with them most. They can come into my office, just like I would do in court, present their case, and then we can decide what's right for the American people. Because right now, I think they're only listening to the people who are writing the checks And that's part of what's breaking our system.
Representative Thompson, you have 30 seconds.
I just take exception with that portrayal, at least and I'm offended in terms of with myself. I don't know about others. I don't see that amount of time. I do. A work week in Washington was probably in the neighborhood of 80 hours a week. I mean, it's intense. It's very early mornings and late nights. And out of that 4 days that I'm in Washington, I make some phone calls, some reminders for folks that if they'd like to come out to an event, about 30 minutes a week. 30 to 45 minutes a week at the longest. And so, I just, that portrayal just is not accurate in any way.
This next question comes to us from Richard Shreve of Bellefonte, Center County. And we begin with you, Representative Thompson. You and your party have tried 60 times to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. If you were successful, would rules for medical coverage go back to the insurance industry? And what would you replace Obamacare with? Specifically, in other words, what stays, what goes?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually was a co-sponsor of a bill to reform health care before the Affordable Care Act came out of Mrs. Pelosi's back office, which was put together by just a handful of her leadership. My rank-and-file friends in the Democratic Party were just as frustrated with not being able to provide input into that, especially those of us who came to Washington with decades of health care experience. And so I've already, going back to those early years, have been supportive of a replacement bill or our own version originally. We need to do that. I was actually in Western Clinton County today, flaming foliage, beautiful day to be in Western Clinton County with those leaves along the Susquehanna River. And and somebody started talking with me about a gentleman come up about my age, and he was talking about how health care was so difficult, and I get that part. And he told me he was in the exchange, Affordable Care Exchange, and I understand that. My wife and I, we were mandated to go into that as members of Congress. We were the first people in. And he was talking about how, and it really sounded good. It was helping him, I thought, because he said it was $56 a month was his premium, and that's outstanding. But his deductible was $6,000.
But what stays and what goes?
Oh, different things that would stay would be, first of all, the ability, and this isn't in there, but greater competition, not putting the health insurance companies first, you put them last. You put the patients first, the citizens first, you put them front and center in their needs. Certainly covering pre-existing conditions have always been a part. Preventative type services actually have, the insurance companies there's been a trend to provide those for free because of the value of it, of catching diseases early, so that needs to be there. I'll tell you one thing that needs to go is the fact that the Affordable Care Act has taken our children off of the Children's Health Assurance Program, CHIP program, and they put them into medical assistance, where on medical assistance, most physicians aren't accepting new patients.
And
there's a lot of things that, and by the way, those 60 times I voted to do that, most of those times, a majority of Democrats agreed, and President Barack Obama signed those changes into law.
All right. That same question. In last Sunday's town hall debate, Donald Trump vowed to kill Obamacare. Hillary Clinton wants to fix it. So what elements of the act do you think need to be improved?
Well, firstly, I'm a proponent of single payer. I think Medicare covers their population for about a 6% overhead. It does it very well. And I think we are the only country that pays about 3 times for our medical care compared to other developed nations, and we don't get 3 times the benefit. So I'm a proponent of single payer. However, it's interesting that the items that Mr. Thompson says he'd keep in this replace version are a lot of the core components of the Affordable Care Act that the Republican budget and the Paul Ryan budget all propose to cut. Right? Both of the proposal that we heard from the Republicans were to put annual limits back in, lifetime limits back in, not provide preventative health for children and families, not provide preventative diagnostic health for women. So while Mr. Thompson is standing here now saying a lot of these things should stay, they're things that his party has pushed very hard to get rid of. So I'm a little skeptical on that. But I want to come back to the 30 minutes a week fundraising. You raised over $800,000 this year. We do the basic math. If you're really spending 30 minutes a week? You're raising $30,000
That's honor.
in 30 minutes? $30,000 in 30 minutes? What must you be telling these people? Send me money and I'll do your bit. I just can't even fathom it. I just can't even fathom it. I wish I could do my math more quickly, but I'm astounded that you can raise that kind of money in 30 minutes a
You
week.
have 30 seconds for a rebuttal, Representative
To
Thompson.
quote the first lady, if you're going to go low, I'll go high. We
It's
don't.
math. Sir, with all due respect, that's math.
I think if you're doing your job right, and if you're working hard, and you're doing the right things, and you're communicating well, people want to support you. And I appreciate that. There's absolutely no tie. In fact, I'm very careful about tying any type of connection between policy and campaign, and to make an accusation like that, a baseless accusation, really is offensive. And let me talk about Medicare too, because that's where the question came from. Medicare is going bankrupt. Medicare is going bankrupt. It's such a great program, and today Medicare only pays 60 cents to 80 cents for every dollar of care that a physician in a hospital or a therapist provides. They can't, physicians can't afford to treat all Medicare patients today because they would go bankrupt.
You have 30 seconds if you care
Real
to
quickly,
rebut.
I mean, the fossil fuel industry is your top contributor. Does that have anything to do with you not co-sponsoring the Reclaim Act? And they're the top contributor of Mike Kelly's campaign and Schuster's campaign, all the other Republican congressmen in Pennsylvania that aren't signing on to this bill. I mean, is that just a coincidence? They gave you over $600,000 in the last 2 cycles. So, I certainly don't make baseless claims, but we tie the money together, it raises the question, and I think it's my obligation to ask it.
And we're going to move on to our next question. Between 2011 and 2015, there were 9 climate-related FEMA natural disaster declarations in Pennsylvania. According to the latest University of Texas at Austin energy poll released last spring, 76% of Americans believe global climate change is occurring and we need to do something about it, including 59% of Republicans. Meanwhile, in the 114th Congress, 59% of House members and 70% of the Senate denies the scientific consensus on human-induced climate change. So to both of you, how do you account for this mismatch between constituents' views and the positions of the representatives in Congress? To you first.
The amount of money that's flowing into our coffers from fossil fuels. They don't want it to change. And they're paying to reelect a whole slew of people to Congress to stem the tide of anything that's going to diminish their industry, in my humble opinion. We're standing here at Penn State, which has a cadre of climate scientists who've been warning us, ringing the bell for years, that this is man-made and we need to do something about it. And as an American country, we can't seem to get there. Yet I'm very pleased to say, I just read the report last night out of Kigali, Rwanda. Right? Countries from around the world got together to get rid of HFCs, right? The hydrofluorocarbons that replaced the CFCs that were eating up our ozone layer. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a smaller step than the Paris Treaty, but it's a step moving forward to get rid of these hydrofluorocarbons that are damaging our environment. And it's striking to me that countries with disparate needs, they can get there, but our Congress can't. I find that to be inexcusable, and I think that it is our obligation to move greener in every single step we can. I have this dream of putting solar panels made in Erie, Pennsylvania on every rooftop of every public school in the district, because it's our obligation to lead on these issues. I can't explain to you otherwise why the Republicans haven't quite gotten there, but I'm happy to know some are getting on the train. I'm just sad that it took so long for us to get here.
Same question to you, Congressman.
Well, I think because the whole debate on, and the way you framed it tonight was framed in such a divisive way. And that's the problem. This debate has been so divisive. Now, we know that climate changes. I know that climate changes. You can't live in a valley that's been carved by thousands of feet of ice and where you can find sea fossils and not know that the climate changes and will continue to change in the future. The idea behind it is preparation and mediation. And that's why I do things like I've supported grant funding for Penn State's Department of Forestry, to be able to look at what is the impact of climate change on our Pennsylvania hardwoods, which is a very important part of our economy, obviously. That's the type of legislation so that we can determine what the impact is and determine what what do we do about it? That's why I support Penn State and all the initiatives that Penn State's involved in when it comes to energy efficiency. I've been the leading champion for that in Washington, D.C. for this university and the great things that the scientists do here, and quite frankly, what this land-grant university does. I've actually been responsible, my leadership position for 6 years now, has been responsible for the largest carbon sinks in the world. And most people look and think, what the heck was that? Well, you know what? It's healthy forests. Because my chairmanship in agriculture includes conservation, forestry, watersheds, environmental issues. And a healthy forest is the largest carbon sink. A healthy forest, which we're actually timbering and actively managing, takes carbon out of the air, and it creates topsoil. So the winning part of this, we can grow the food we need.
As follow-up, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change will enter into force on November 4th after a coalition of the world's largest polluters pushed it past a key threshold on October 5th. According to the terms of the landmark agreement, it cannot be undone in the next 4 years, regardless of who is the next president. Will you help to uphold the commitments that the Paris Agreement embodies, and does it go far enough?
It's an illegal agreement. It's a treaty. It's the type of thing, now I don't get a say in it. You've read the Constitution. Constitutionally, it's the United States Senate that has to advise and consent to treaties. And the fact that the administration did this unilaterally is completely illegal. I suspect this will make its way through the courts the way other actions have, and the federal courts have upheld unconstitutional illegal activities by the administration. But let me just say that, we're doing well as a country. The amount of greenhouse gas in the United States of America, because of the remarkable progress that we have made, is significantly down, going back probably at least a decade. And so why we would tie ourselves to a global entity when we're making progress, when our forests are healthy, where we have great carbon sinks. And let me just say, I don't believe in commercializing energy that's not ready for prime time. I think that's wasteful to the taxpayers, the hardworking American taxpayers. But I am very supportive, and talk with the Department of Energy. I work with them very closely for their energy labs, who are researching alternatives, researching better uses for fossil fuels, researching how our coal seams can be sources of rare earth minerals today, right here in Pennsylvania, in Clearfield County.
Same question to you, Ms. Strano-Taylor. Will you help to uphold the commitments that the Paris Agreement embodies, and does it go far enough?
Yes, and it's a simple answer. We used to be a leader in the world. We used to hold others accountable for not stepping in our footsteps when we were leading, right, with getting rid of child labor, making sure we had an interstate highway system. We were a leader in the world. And in this case, we have an opportunity to stand on the right side of history and do the right thing. But I hear Mr. Thompson saying that we're going to let it be squabbled and fought over in the courts, and maybe we won't lead. We don't have time to be squabbling about climate change. It's beating us. But I need to comment. You said that these renewable energies aren't ready for prime time. Oil wasn't ready for prime time when we started subsidizing it as an American country. Our government subsidized the search for fossil fuels. We subsidized the perfection of that tool, of that resource. So why is it so insane that we would help subsidize renewable resources until they are perfected to the point where we've perfected fracking, right? I don't understand why we can't apply the same logic. So I think it's our obligation to do what we can to make sure that our Earth is hopefully better off for our kids and our grandkids, and anything short of that I think is irresponsible.
You have 30 seconds, Representative Thompson.
Let me just say that, research and development, absolutely. And I love the great work that goes on this campus, that some of it is subsidized through the Department of Energy, but we have our Department of Energy labs as well, that's looking at solar, that's looking at wind, it's looking at alternative energies, it's looking at fossil fuels on how we do that. And you know what? They've developed resources to be able to do that, reducing emissions. And so I certainly support all that. But you know what? There's better ways to do things, and I don't believe that punishing American families by raising their costs of energy is necessary in order to get to the goal of quite frankly, more efficient, cleaner energy.
This next question is on hydraulic fracturing, which you just mentioned. We begin with you, Ms. Strano-Taylor. Hydraulic fracturing, the controversial oil and gas technology fueling both America's energy boom and widespread health and safety concerns, is changing the landscape of northeastern and southwestern Pennsylvania. This past June, a federal judge struck down President Obama's attempt to tighten fracking rules, saying the measures to prevent pollution from fracking lacked congressional authority. In your opinion, do we need stricter oversight of drilling practices to ensure that oil and gas operations are conducted safely and responsibly?
We do, because what we found out, our great Auditor General in the state of Pennsylvania, Eugene T. Pasquale, audited the DEP, I think in 2015. And it turned out that they were grossly underfunded, and they weren't able to inspect all of the wells in Pennsylvania. So it looked like there were low violation rates. But the reality was that there weren't enough people out in the field to catch every violation. So to rely on the states to police this well is kind of a wing and a prayer. So I think we should be doing it from the federal level, because once this water is destroyed, you can't get it back, right? Once it's tainted, it's tainted. Our state Supreme Court recently just overturned a whole slew of pro-fracking language that the legislature had passed back in 2013. They got rid of the gag rule. Doctors were prohibited from talking about sicknesses that they traced to fracking until our state Supreme Court overturned it. So we have a lot of work when it comes to protecting our environment, right? Those American families that Mr. Thompson claims we're punishing, we're trying to keep them safe from being poisoned. And for what it's worth, on the fracking, we were promised that this was going to bring us energy independence. We sold a whole bunch of the natural gas that came out of the ground in Pennsylvania to China. It didn't make us any more energy independent, and it didn't put our guys to work. You go to a well pad, all the license plates were people from West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Texas. So it hasn't brought us what was promised, and it's our responsibility to start cleaning it up.
Representative Thompson.
If the DEP doesn't have sufficient staff, and by the way, permits for drilling, the money for permits used to hire more staff with the Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania. Department of Environmental Protection actually has gotten a very high score in terms of their ability to regulate, and that's where the regulation should be. And why is that? Because every state's different, has different geology, different topology. I mean, they're just, it would be impossible. You know, if the DEP doesn't have enough staff to do it, so we're going to hire an army of the EPA and have them regulate all the places where we produce energy in this country. We are the largest producer of energy in the world today, the United States of America. And Pennsylvania is like number 2 or number 3. It's very impressive, actually. And yes, we do export some, but the fact is, by exporting, we can, for the time being, and we're never going to export that much. I was appreciative the Obama administration permitted, I believe, 7 or 9 ports to be able to export natural gas. That helps the market. It helps to keep jobs in the Pennsylvania 5th District when there's a demand for more natural gas. And so I don't think long term, because these countries actually have their own natural gas. And one of the things this administration has done well is we've exported hydrofracking technology to the parts of the world today that are dependent on Russia and dependent on the Middle East, so we can help them produce their own.
We move to our next question. Student debt is now nearly $1.3 trillion, spread out among 43 million borrowers. And this year's college graduates will owe an average of $37,000. That brings us to this question from Steve Parr of State College, who asks, what is your plan to address the student loan crisis, and can you reassure someone graduating from college in this district that they'll have real job opportunities?
Well, I work hard every day for those job opportunities, obviously, working with, I will say the government never, ever created a real job, but it creates the conditions by which jobs grow, which jobs are sustained, or unfortunately jobs go away. And my goal is to make sure we're doing the right things. We've done that on tax policy, making sure that the tax deductions are permanent for not just families, but for small businesses, which are the backbone of this. In terms of student debt, that's something that I work on and lead and try to, I lead on as a part of the Education Workforce Committee. I've been on the Higher Education Subcommittee. I helped to help with the bill and support the bill that we passed to really to tie the student loan rate to prime so that it couldn't be manipulated and couldn't be increased dramatically. It's a three-tiered system for the three different types of student loans, depending whether parents are not involved. I work every day on the Education Workforce Committee to be able to eliminate the unfunded mandates that are placed by the federal government that, quite frankly, that you have to pay for. And the only place you pay for that is increasing tuition. I also try to create just different pathways to success in life as well. Not every student will go to a four-year college, and part of that perhaps is creating opportunities for competition where we promote career and technical education training. You promote students being career-ready, job-ready when they graduate from high school, and that competition tends to decrease cost and increase quality in the long run.
Ms. Strano-Taylor, what will you do to both reduce student debt and make college more affordable?
In the 2015 Republican budget that you, Mr. Thompson, voted for, it allowed the American Opportunity Tax Credit to expire. The American Opportunity Tax Credit allows students to deduct a credit. They get a credit of $2,500 for each of the 4 years that they're in school, which means they have to borrow less money. And in the Republican budget, that went away. It also froze Pell Grants, so they couldn't increase with inflation. We know that costs of college are increasing, but if we follow the Republican model, it's not doing anything to help our college students. I'm a huge proponent that students that come from families that earn under $125,000 a year get to go to college tuition free, right? We have the money in this country to do right by our Americans. We just don't have the political will to spend it like we should. We had 63 people that spent half of the money that have been paying for our presidential elections. Right? So this isn't a question of whether we have the money. We just don't have the will to spend it where it needs to be spent. And I would argue helping our college students get out and take a job that they love and do well without being saddled by debt is the right thing we should be doing as a country. But the Republicans in Congress, including Mr. Thompson, aren't following us down that same path.
30 seconds.
The budgets is about messaging. It's about showing a pathway to a balanced budget. And, you know, in both Democratic, Republican, and the president's budget. And by the way, the president's budget, I think, has only gotten just maybe a handful of votes over the past 8 years from either party. In the past, the Democrat that's introduced the president's budget didn't even vote for the president's budget. The real work in terms of spending happens in appropriations. In the appropriations process, we've tried to support. Now, I also want to say that in terms of college free, that will need to be paid for. And my concern...
And I'm sorry, you're just about out of time, if you can just wrap that up.
Sure. The fact is that I'm not... Penn State's a state-affiliated college. Being state-affiliated but not completely government, does that mean that students going to Penn State wouldn't be a part of this college free for public institutions? There'll be winners and losers, and there's better ways to do things in terms of problem solving.
All right. Our next question. Political dysfunction continues to rank as a major concern. Americans want accountability, an end to political dysfunction, and assurances that their voices are being heard. According to a recent Marketplace Edison research poll, the majority of Americans say the words afraid and embarrassed describe their feelings about this 2016 election year. If elected, what will you do to bring unity to Washington and help end partisanship and gridlock? Well,
I think locking money out of the equation, first and foremost, is key, because I think anybody who hasn't run for office probably doesn't have a good glimpse in what it's like to call people and ask people for money, right? I mean, if you don't think there's a quid pro quo expected there, you know, I have another story to tell you. But also, the work that I do in my county, I facilitate custody conflicts between parties that have no lawyers, fighting over their kids, the most important thing in their lives. And I have an 88% settlement rate in an hour. These people walk out with a custody order so no one's pulling on their kids' arms on Christmas morning, right? I happen to be quite good and skilled at getting people who didn't think they had anything in common to find something about which they can agree and move forward. And I recognize that you just can't land in Washington and fix it tomorrow, right? But I certainly I'm capable, and I look forward to the challenge. And then I think it's important to bring that information back and not just have a teletown hall, but actually convene deliberative democracy sessions with 200, 300 people in every county that want to be involved and talk to them about what it's like there and what the legislation is, and not rely on the messaging of these budgets, right? Mr. Thompson said it's all about messaging. How about we just have a conversation and tell people what this stuff means? Because they're more than capable of getting it, and I'd prefer that they get it straight from the horse's mouth than Fox News or MSNBC.
What have you done or will you do to
Sure.
help end partisanship and gridlock in Washington?
Well, let me just say, working for 730,000 constituents, I'm 100% accessible. And I do have town hall meetings, but I also have individual meetings. We schedule meetings. Because I work for you. I work for the citizens of the Pennsylvania 5th District, and I work hard at that. And communication is important. Listening is important at listening and leading and making a difference. And so, I'm very proud to be on the former Senator Lugar. He has an organization, and I believe I'm number 56 out of like 480 in terms of partisanship, of working together. Because I believe that we don't need to spend a lot of time, and I don't spend a lot of time on maybe what we disagree upon once I'm in Washington. The most important thing is what we can agree upon, and are we willing to come to the table to be able to discuss? And that's the grounds for bipartisan success. And so let me list just real quickly the things where have been effective. Transportation bill, the education bill. I got at least 3 teachers in the audience here today I work very closely with, and I really appreciate their input. Anti-slavery legislation we've enacted, job training, the agriculture, the comprehensive addictions, bills for the environment, cleaning up our watersheds, reducing suicide, foster care, disability rights. It just and protecting private property most recently. Those are all things that President Obama has put a signature on that my fingerprints are on.
All right, and now to our closing comments, beginning with Ms. Strano Taylor.
Thank you, Patty, and WPSU for hosting this evening. This is the weirdest year of politics that I can remember. Everybody is angry. Congress hasn't done their job. With a 20% approval rating, our incumbents, including Glenn Thompson, are reelected 96% of the time. They make $174,000 per year, and this year they will only be in session for 111 days. That's fewer days than my kids will be in school. Mr. Thompson has had 8 years to get it right, and he hasn't. He's raised $4.6 million for the privilege to say, but he hasn't served our district well. And that makes me angry. And that's why I'm running again. I'm not beholden to anybody's money. I don't have a single corporate donor. I'm clean. The way we begin to help our district is by replacing our member of Congress. We have term limits. They're called elections, and there is one on November 8th. My name is Kerith Strano Taylor, and I can do this job better than he has. I'm asking for your vote.
Representative Thompson.
Patty, first of all, thank you very much to you, to WPSU, to this great land-grant university, and quite frankly, to all the folks behind the monitors and the cameras and the sound system, who I don't think get a lot of recognition for what they do. While gridlock certainly dominates the 24-hour news cycle, I've been working to establish new traffic patterns, listening and leading with your homegrown solutions. We repealed No Child Left Behind, allowing states to escape Common Core. Earlier this fall, the House passed my bill to modernize career and technical education. These laws will work together to support family-sustaining jobs and prepare the 21st century workforce. I supported legislation for access to recreation on our rivers and inner forests and communities. And we also passed the Farm Bill, which gives us an affordable and safe food supply. That supports 1 in 7 jobs in Pennsylvania. Families and small businesses need certainty in our tax code. And I supported a bipartisan law that was signed into law by President Obama to make more than 20 provisions permanent. As the father of a wounded warrior, I know the importance of a strong military. Our homegrown solutions have used telemedicine to lower military suicide rate. This work is far from done, and my commitment to our veterans is unwavering. My vision is one of partnership. My commitment is to take your homegrown solutions to Washington, and on November 8th, I'm seeking your vote. Together, we can continue to make a difference. Thank you, and God bless America.
And on that note, we're out of time. Thank you so much, and good night.